Bashitute me camera moilo chindilo Bashitute nasvalilo Koto anab Kosovo Gypsies Bashitute me.
This next poem is called Photos of the Poor. You asked me if I have photos of my grandparents dressed in the old gypsy way. I had photos showing how our women once covered themselves from head to foot, showing only their hands. Those photos are now ash, along with everything else I had to leave behind, when 5 KLA soldiers in black uniforms came to our home at 2 o'clock in the morning. Foreign aid workers now take photos of us, showing how poor we are, living in tents for the first time. We weren't dirty or poor until NATO arrived. This is another poem written in the voice of an old Romany woman. It's called Chisto Rome, the Pure Gypsy. She was an old woman with a big nose and a large wart by her right eye. Her copper-colored skin, greenish-blue eyes, orange blouse and turquoise scarf made her look like a Chagall painting. She didn't know how old she was and only laughed when asked the year she was born. Her father had a horse and wagon to haul things for people. Her grandfather did the same work. Her people were Rabaji or Roma. They followed the Muslim religion like the Albanians who lived nearby. Her father never told her about their origins. She had never heard of nomadic gypsies. All their ancestors had lived in houses. She never went to school, never learned to read or write, was 15 when she married. She never had any gold, no jewelry. They barely had enough to eat. She spent her whole life looking for work. Last year the Serbs gave her a job scrubbing school floors until NATO bombed the building. After the war, the KLA gave her 2 minutes to leave her home before they burned it. They said she had collaborated with the Serbs because she had cleaned their floors. When she arrived in our camp, she was wearing only her pajamas. She said she was Chisto Rome, 100% pure gypsy, but she never liked to dance. This is one of the few poems that I wrote in my own voice while I was living in gypsies in the refugee camp. It's called The Pigeon Man. The Pigeon Man showed me the photos of his pets in prison. After being sentenced for stabbing a man, his pigeons had followed him there too. Now they had found him in our camp, 4 weeks after the KLA had burned his home and coop. He had 5 different kinds. The bird that amazed me the most was the brown one that made barrel rolls just above the rooftops, like the NATO jet that had strafed his sister's home, killing all her children. According to his gypsy tradition, his nieces and nephews were now stars in the sky waiting for him. On earth, he still had his pigeons, who fluttered above as he led them to their new pen in a pine grove. "Don't step in their shit," he told me, ignoring the possibility of landmines, "or you'll get hooked on them for life." I know he was talking about his pigeons, but he could have been talking about how I got hooked on his people. Shortly after I arrived in the gypsy camp, British K4 asked me to spy on the gypsies. They asked me to see if the gypsies had hand grenades or guns in their tents. Of course, they barely had the clothes they fled in, let alone weapons. This next poem is called Presents from England. Our camp was in mourning when the British Army truck arrived. Ibrahim's father had died during the night. Packets of soap shavings were being sewn into his Muslim shroud when the soldiers began throwing presents from their truck. The soldiers made a game out of which gypsy could jump the highest, delighted to see bare-chested young men fighting over stuffed bears, badminton rackets, cricket balls, tennis balls, golf balls, plastic frisbees, and hairless Barbie dolls. By the time the camp leaders arrived from the mourning tent, the distribution was over. None of the small children got a present. A British brigadier standing next to the truck was interviewed and photographed by a NATO public relations officer. The brigadier proudly proclaimed his soldiers had gotten their families in Britain to donate used toys to these needy Muslim children. He said it was a great act of Christian charity.